Chapter 1. The New Beginning. I always believed that cities had souls. Each one whispered different things to you when you arrived. Some offered comfort, others excitement, and a few made you feel like you didn't belong. But London felt like a question I hadn't yet learned how to answer. It was early September when I stepped off the train at King's Cross Station, clutching a too-heavy suitcase and an even heavier heart. I had just left behind everything I knew, my small flat in Warsaw, my quiet life as a literature student, and a relationship that had long since lost its warmth. I wasn't running away. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The scholarship at a university in London was a dream I had chased for years, but the timing felt strangely perfect, like the universe had cracked open a door for me just as I was looking for a way out. I rented a tiny room in a shared house in Camden. The walls were thin, the kitchen always smelled like curry, and the hot water worked only when it wanted to. But it was mine. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My classes started a week later. I threw myself into them, reading, writing, staying late in the library. I wasn't looking for anyone. Honestly, I didn't think I was ready. But life has a way of surprising you just when you least expect it. His name was Aiden. I met him on a rainy Wednesday afternoon in the university cafe. I had just spilled my coffee all over my notes, and he offered me a napkin and a smile that felt like sunlight. And that was the beginning of everything? Chapter 2. Raindrops and Conversations. The day after I met Aiden, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not just because he had the kind of smile that stayed with you long after it was gone, but because our brief conversation had felt so easy, natural. Like we had known each other in another life. I told myself it was nothing. Just a kind stranger. But the next day, as I stood in line at the same cafe, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Careful with the coffee today." I turned and there he was, wet hair, gray hoodie, and that same crooked smile. "I am thinking of switching to tea," I said, trying to sound casual. "Wise choice," he laughed. Less tragic when spilled. We ended up sitting together again. Just like before, the conversation flowed. We talked about books. He liked Murakami and Wilde. I preferred Dostoevsky and Woolf. We debated over the best rainy day music. He said Bon Iver. I insisted on classical piano. He was a psychology student, fascinated by people and their stories. I told him about my love for literature, my move from Poland, and how strange yet thrilling it felt to start over. At one point, he leaned back and said, "You have this look in your eyes, like you're always reading the world." I blushed. Maybe I am. We sat there for over an hour, rain tapping gently on the windows, the smell of coffee and autumn filling the air. When we finally stood to leave, he hesitated, then asked, "Would you want to grab dinner sometime?" Just, as friends. Or not as friends. I felt something stir inside me, excitement, nervousness, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes," I said. "I would like that." And just like that, something began to bloom between us, quiet, unexpected, and fragile like the first light after a storm. Chapter 3. First Dinner, First Sparks. Our first dinner wasn't fancy, just a little Italian place near campus with flickering candlelight and mismatched chairs. It felt cozy, unpretentious, like something out of a movie I didn't know I had been waiting to star in. Aiden arrived a few minutes early. When I walked in, he stood up from the table with a nervous grin and said, "You came." I said I would. I smiled, though my heart was beating louder than it should have been. We ordered pasta and wine. I chose something I couldn't pronounce, and he teased me gently about it. He talked more that night about his family in Edinburgh, how he missed the sea, how he used to write songs before life got too busy. There was a moment, right in the middle of the evening, when the world seemed to go quiet around us. I was laughing at something he said, something silly about his disastrous attempt to cook risotto, and then suddenly, our eyes met. The kind of silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of meaning, of tension, of something unspoken that neither of us dared to say out loud. After dinner, we walked through the streets of London, the city glowing gold under the streetlights. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining like glass. "I like this," he said softly. "Being with you." I looked at him, surprised by how warm that made me feel. "I like it too." When we reached the corner where we had to part ways, he paused. I could feel it, something hanging in the air, a question, maybe a hope. "Good night, Aiden," I said quietly. "Good night, Zosha." He had remembered my name. Said it like it mattered. I walked home with a feeling I couldn't name yet. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that felt real. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself smiling for no reason at all. Chapter 4. Something like falling. The days that followed felt lighter, as if the gray skies of London had shifted just slightly in color. I found myself waking up earlier, picking nicer outfits, noticing details I used to overlook, how the trees near campus were slowly turning gold, how Aiden always carried a small notebook in his jacket pocket. We weren't officially anything. No labels. No big declarations. But we were something. He would wait for me after class sometimes, pretending it was a coincidence. We'd sit on the steps outside the library and talk about everything and nothing, philosophy, childhood memories, the way people change and stay the same. One afternoon, as we sat with cups of steaming chai from a nearby street vendor, he asked, "Why did you really come here, Zosha?" Not the scholarship answer. The real one. I hesitated. I needed to disappear for a while, I admitted. Not forever. Just long enough to remember who I am without someone else defining it. He nodded, not asking for more. Aiden never pushed. He didn't try to fix me or fill the silence with meaningless words. He just sat there, present, warm, real. And slowly I began to let him in. One evening, we ended up at his place, listening to music in his tiny flat with fairy lights strung haphazardly across the ceiling. He played guitar softly, almost shyly. His fingers moved like he was afraid to disturb the quiet. "Did you write that?" I asked. He nodded. "It is about starting over." I didn't tell him then, but it made something ache deep inside me. In the best way. That night, as I stood at his doorway, ready to leave, he leaned closer, just enough for me to feel his breath, but not enough to kiss me. "I want to kiss you," he whispered. "But only if you want me to." I looked up at him, heart pounding. "I do," I said. And when our lips met, it wasn't fire or thunder. It was something gentler, deeper. It felt like home. Chapter 5. The space between. The kiss changed everything, and yet nothing. The next day, we still met at our usual cafe. We still laughed about silly things. He still carried his notebook, and I still ordered tea I never quite finished. But beneath the familiar rhythm, something had shifted. There was a new awareness in how he looked at me, how his fingers brushed mine when we walked too closely, how the pauses in our conversations began to carry weight. We weren't pretending anymore. And still I was scared. Not of Aiden, never of him, but of how fast my heart was unfolding in his presence, of how easy it felt to fall for someone who saw me so clearly. I hadn't told him everything. Not yet. Not about the boy I left behind in Warsaw, not about the way I had once built my entire identity around another person and watched it crumble when he stopped loving me. One night I sat on the windowsill of my tiny room, watching the rain blur the streetlights. Aiden had texted, "Can I see you tomorrow?" And I had answered, "Yes, always." And I meant it. But I also knew I was standing at the edge of something fragile. The next day, I met him at the university gardens. The air was crisp, the trees a mix of fire orange and deep red. He was sitting on a bench, scribbling in his notebook. "What are you writing?" I asked as I sat beside him. "Thoughts," he said. "Half-formed ones. Can I see?" He closed it gently and smiled. "Not yet." We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "There are things I haven't told you." He turned to me, his expression soft. "I know. And when you're ready, I'll listen." That moment, his patience, his quiet understanding unlocked something in me. And slowly I began to tell him the truth. Not all at once, not perfectly, but honestly. He didn't try to fix me. He just took my hand, held it like a promise, and said, "Thank you." That's when I realized real love isn't loud. Sometimes it is found in the space between words, in the pauses where we let each other simply be.